Hello, everyone. Welcome back to BookBeat, and we're continuing with Robert B. Parker's series Spenser. Today, we're looking at book 3 called Mortal Stakes. Um, Reading various reviews on the book, it seems to be one of his most highly regarded and kind of a fan favorite. So, let's take a look. Here we go. So, in this book, of course, we've got our main hero, Spenser. We don't know his first name. We never get to know it in the 30 years of the series. And the main other characters in the story are a guy named Marty Rabb, who is the ace pitcher for the Boston Red Sox baseball team. Spenser tells us that the best pitcher he ever saw in his whole life was Sandy Koufax, a lefty, and he said Marty Rabb was the second best. Of course, he's not a real player, although other people named in the story, other baseball players are real, but none of the Boston players are real, and Marty Rabb isn't, but we get the idea. Who else is in the story? Another very important person is Marty Rabb's wife, Linda, and I will tell you more about her in a minute or two, but she's a central figure in the story and basically the key person in why we can even call this a mystery or a crime fiction story. And then we've got some bad guys. One is Bucky Maynard, who is a fat Southerner who happens to be the play-by-play TV announcer for the Boston games. We don't like him from the beginning, and it turns out that he's one of the bad guys in the story. And another bad guy, a very dangerous loan shark named Frank Dorr, who is in some ways working together with Bucky and also has Bucky under his thumbs. Besides that, main characters, we meet in New York City Patricia Utley, a madam, and she's someone we actually meet in future stories a few more times. And Violet, a pimp, a very colorful pimp that Spenser meets up with once or twice and has some very interesting conversations with. And then, Spenser's two main love interests at this point in the series, Susan Silverman and Brenda Loring. We also meet Quirk, Benson, and Healy, who are state police, local police. Okay, so the story the story takes place in mainly in the Boston area, and as I mentioned before, I've never been to Boston. I really don't know a lot about it, but I really do enjoy Spenser's description. It's always Spenser talking. It's a first-person narrative. His descriptions of the various places he lives. He walks to his favorite restaurants, some bars, and in this story, of course, Fenway Park. If you're a baseball fan at all, you've heard of Fenway Park. So it's really enjoyable for us to hear Spenser talk about going to Fenway Park and his descriptions of what it's like there. But other places that he travels to in the story, he does fly to Chicago and then rents a car and drives out to a very, very poor rural part of Illinois to meet up with Linda Rabb's parents and try to get some information from them about their daughter. And actually, Buffalo is mentioned twice in the story, not favorably. Once when he's flying over Buffalo, he looks down on it and is thankful that he's not there. So what is the story then? What is it all about? Why is this a Spenser mystery? Well, the story is this. Marty Rabb, the pitcher, is being blackmailed by Maynard, Bucky Maynard, the TV play-by-play announcer. He's being blackmailed by him to lose games and give up runs at certain innings of certain games. Maynard himself owes money to the guy I mentioned, the loan shark, Durr, but he doesn't have enough money to pay him back, so he's still in his debt, and his solution to this is to give him gambling tips related to Rabb throwing games or giving up home runs. So, how can Rabb be blackmailed? Well, it's his wife. Rabb's wife, Linda, is a former call girl in New York City, and in fact, that is how they meet each other. He was her customer at one point, and they fell in love, and she started a new life. She also acted or participated in one porn movie, a very well done porn movie, but a porn movie all the same. So Rabb and his wife are trying to keep this quiet. Maynard threatens to go public with it if Rabb doesn't cooperate and do what he's told to do. So that's the story. And of course, Spenser doesn't know any of this at the beginning of the story. And so that's where the detecting part of the story comes in. So some of the major action scenes in the story, Spenser with the loan shark Dare or Door, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He's got a gunman that is with him all the time, a guy named Wally Hogg, who's a professional killer. And Spenser and these guys, we have 3 or 4 scenes that are really, I don't know, thrilling, nerve-wracking, and quite well done. Spenser with the fat, disgusting Maynard. And Maynard has also got his driver / bodyguard, a guy named Lester, who apparently is an expert at Taekwondo, the Korean martial art. And Spenser does get into a fight with Lester, and it's very well written. Other important scenes in the book, Spenser going out, like I said, to rural Illinois. He even sees the northern part of the Mississippi River. But his interaction with the local sheriff and Linda's folks is really makes an impression. And then Spenser in New York City. Patricia Utley in the Upper West Side, and this tall, loud black pimp named Violet on the Lower East Side. Those scenes are funny and interesting. I'll read a quote or a section or two from those in a bit. So what surprised me about this book? Some things really interesting here. One is the depth of understanding between Spenser and Susan. We can see, we learn that she really understands him and admires him. He's a violent person doing a violent job, but he's got a code of ethics, and basically he's a good person. He kills people, but only the bad guys. Although in later books, maybe that's not necessarily true. We learn later that he's willing to kill people that he normally wouldn't in order to help or save Susan, especially, for example, in book 12, The Catskill Eagle, which is probably my favorite Spenser book. We'll get to that one sooner or later. What else surprised me in this book that I loved? Definitely the baseball. Robert B. Parker writes about sports in a few other books. He writes about basketball. He writes about horse racing. Well, the horse racing part of it he doesn't really get into much, but he does like sports, and he's good at writing about new things. It's not just the stuff that we hear all the time about Spenser and his dealings with criminals. And no, he very occasionally will get into something new, and he's able to write about it so well. And he does it so well here too, with the baseball, the locker room humor, the banter, funny, coarse, sexual, and yeah, again, very funny. It's one of the main reasons I love the Spenser books. They're always funny, and if they weren't funny, I probably wouldn't be as interested in them. Other things here. This surprised me a lot. There are a few scenes where Spenser talks about how scared he is, and you just don't get that in his other books. Like once again, I'll refer to Catskill Eagle. Once we get to Catskill Eagle, it's like Spenser is brimming with confidence, but not here. He's sweating, he can't breathe, he's got a stomach ache. And I think the reason all of this changes in later books is the existence of maybe Hawk. Hawk's got his back. The two of them, they're not partners, but they're close friends, and they often work together. And Spenser by himself feels his own vulnerability, whereas when he's with Hawk, I think he feels a lot more confidence, and both of them do, vice versa. Okay, so repeats. As I mentioned before, I got into this series kind of halfway through, so I'm meeting some people here that I already know, but I mentioned Patricia Utley, the madam in New York City. She shows up in 3 or 4 future Spenser books. It's kind of surprising. The cops, Quirk, Healy, Benson, they're there. They're almost always there, and they're good. They're good. They're an important part of it. The fact that Spenser is a reader, he loves literature, he loves poetry, that comes up in this book a few times. The fact that Spenser loves cooking, that comes up in a lot of books in the future, but it shows up here too. I think just enough. In some of his future books, it feels like almost half the book is his cooking, and that's probably a bit too much. But here it's enjoyable. His attitude towards women, not so sexist this time, but one line that came up that I laughed at because it comes up again and again is his comments on how women do their makeup, and apparently his ideal woman is a woman who does her makeup expertly applied, expertly done. He tends to really admire those kind of women, and if their makeup is not well done, they're low class and they're just not real women in his mind. So it's kind of funny. The title, Mortal Stakes. It's part of a quotation from a poet. I'll let you find out who that poet is. You might already know. But this is a repeat because actually this is also quoted in Catskill Eagle. Catskill Eagle. Okay, now let me read to you a few of my favorite quotations, and give me just a second here. Okay. So, as I mentioned, baseball plays a big part in this story. So let's start with the opening lines of the book. It was summertime and the living was easy for the Red Sox because Marty Rabb was throwing the ball past the New York Yankees in a style to which he'd become accustomed. I was there in the Skyview seats, drinking Miller High Life from a big paper cup, eating peanuts in a ballpark. Okay. Eating peanuts and having a very nice time. Sorry, I'm using a Kindle and didn't go on to the next page. Eating peanuts and having a very nice time. I wasn't supposed to be having a nice time. I was supposed to be working. But now and then you can do both. For serious looking at baseball, there are few places better than Fenway Park. The stands are close to the playing field. The fences are a hopeful green. I love that, a hopeful green. And the young men in their white uniforms are working on real grass, the authentic, natural article. Under the actual sky, in the temperature as it really is. No tartan turf, no astrodome, no air conditioning. Not too many pennants over the years, but no Texans either. Life is adjustment, and I love the beer. Then he talks about Marty Rabb. The best pitcher I ever saw was Sandy Koufax, and the next best was Marty Rabb. Rabb was left-handed like Koufax, but bigger, and he had a hard slider that waited for you to commit yourself before it broke. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, if you're a baseball fan, you're going to love the various parts in here that are about baseball. If you're not a baseball fan, well, yeah, I think you can still enjoy it, and you can learn something for sure. Okay, so Spenser is chatting with the president of the Boston Red Sox, who wants to hire him. And he says, "What do you charge?" $100 a day in expenses, but I'm running a special this week at no extra charge. I teach you how to weave a blackjack. Erskine said, "I heard you were a wit." I wasn't sure he believed it. "Your lawyer tell you that too?" I asked. "Yes, he discussed you with a state police detective named Healy. I think Healy's sister's married my lawyer's wife's brother. Well, hell, Erskine, you know all you really can know about me. The only way you can find out if you can trust me is to try it. I'm a licensed private detective. I've never been to jail, and I have an open, honest face. I'm willing to sit here and let you look at me for a while. I owe you for the free ball game, but eventually you'll have to ask me what you want to ask me, or ask me to leave. Erskine stared at me some more. His cheeks seemed a little redder, and he was beginning to develop callous tissue on his lower lip. He brought his left hand down flat on the top of the desk. Okay, he said, you're right. I got no choice. It's nice to be wanted, I said. I want you to see if Marty Rab's got gambling connections. Rab? I said. Snappy comebacks are one of my specialties. That's right, Rab. There's a rumor. No, not even that. A whisper, a faint, pale hint that Rab might be shading a game now and then. Marty Rab? I said. When I've got a good line, I like to stick with it. I know, it's hard to believe. I don't believe it. I don't believe it, in fact. But it's possible, and it's got to be checked. You know what even the rumor of a fix means to baseball. I nodded. If you did have Rab in your teacup, you could make a buck, couldn't you? Just hearing me say it made Erskine swallow hard. He leaned forward over the desk. That's right, he said. You can get good odds against the Sox anytime Marty pitches. If you could get that extra percentage by having Rab on your end of the bet, you could make a lot of money. Okay, so that kind of sets the scene as usual and tells us, a little bit about who Spenser is. Basically, he's not intimidated at all by rich people, by bank presidents, by sports club presidents, and he's who he is. He is who he is. Okay, let me see. Okay. He's now walking up to the stadium. As I turned down Brookline Avenue toward the park, I felt the old feeling. My father and I used to go this early to watch the teams take infield. I walked the 2 blocks down Brookline Avenue, turned the corner at Jersey Street, and went up the stairs to Erskine's office. Okay. We went into the locker room. My first reaction was disappointment. It looked like most other locker rooms. Open lockers with a shelf at the top, stools in front of them, nameplates above. To the right, the training area with whirlpool, rubbing table, a medical-looking cabinet with an assortment of tape and liniment behind the glass doors at the top. A man in a white t-shirt and white cotton pants was taping the left ankle of a burly black man who sat on the table in his shorts, smoking a cigar. The players were dressing. One of them, a squat, red-haired kid, was yelling to someone out of sight behind the lockers. "Hey, Ray, can I be in the pen again tonight? There's a broad out there, gives me a beaver shot every time we're home." A voice from behind the locker said, "Were you looking for her in Detroit last week and when you dropped that foul?" "Aw, come on, Ray. Bill Dickey used to drop them once in a while. I seen you drop one once when I was a little kid and you was my idol." Yeah, this is the kind of locker room banter that Parker does such a good job with. I think, in this book for sure. Okay, let me scroll up to the next one here. Okay. Okay, Spenser goes to see a bookie that he occasionally goes to for information. Spenser's not a gambler, but because he's a detective, he needs to know a lot of different kinds of people. So he walks in and he says, "Evening, Lenny." Lenny said, "You know, Spenser, little things break your balls. You ever notice that? I mean, I used to read the Record American, right? Nice little tabloid size, easy to handle. Then they buy up the Herald and go the big format, and it's like reading a freaking road map. Now that busts my nuts, trying to fold this thing right. That kind of stuff ever bother you?" On slow days, I said. Okay. So he's talking with this guy a bit more. "Hey, Frank." He raised a finger at the bartender. "A shot and a beer, okay?" The bartender brought them over, put the beer on a little paper coaster, and went back behind the bar. I drank the shot. "Well," I said, "if I had worms, I guess they're taken care of." "Yeah, Frank don't age that stuff all that long, does he?" I sipped the beer. It was better than the whiskey. "Lenny, I need to know something without letting it get around that I'm asking." His skin was remarkable, smooth and pale and unlined. The sun had rarely shone upon it. It made him look a lot younger than I knew he was. "Yeah," he said, "sure, kid. I never saw any advantage talking about things for no good reason. What do you want to know?" He sipped some beer, holding the glass in the tips of his fingers with the little finger sticking out. When he put the glass down, he took the handkerchief from his breast pocket and wiped his mouth carefully. "I want to know if you've heard anything about Marty Rabb." "Like what?" he said. "Like anything at all." "You mean, does he occasionally place a wager, that kind of thing?" That or anything else." "Well, he never placed a bet with me," Seltzer said, "but I heard something peculiar about him. The odds seem to shift a little when he pitches. I mean, there's some funny money place when he's scheduled to go. Nothing big, nothing I'd even think about if somebody like you didn't come around and ask about him. There's just a whisper, just a ruffle that not everything is entirely Jake. I wouldn't hesitate taking money when Rabb's pitching. I don't know anyone that would. It's just..." "Want another drink?" "Nah, the last one took the enamel off my front teeth," I said. Okay, yeah, nice little discussion that Spenser has with a bookie. And let me see, what else do we have? Okay, let me scroll up the page here. Okay. Okay. Okay, here, yeah, Spenser's maybe a little bit nostalgic. We can feel his loneliness. And this kind of loneliness, I think, is what draws him closer and closer to Susan. Basically, he's got no family, he doesn't really have friends, and maybe she's the same. But anyway, he goes, "I looked at my watch, 6:10. After supper on a summer evening. Twilight softball leagues were getting underway at this hour. Kids were going out to hang on the corner till dark. Men were watering their lawns, their wives sitting nearby in lawn chairs. I was looking at 2 pigeons. Yeah. The kind of feeling maybe most of us who grew up in the suburb or in some parts of the city can relate to, for sure, huh? Okay. Okay, so Spenser goes out to Illinois, rural Illinois, trying to track down some information on Rab's wife, and goes and meets her family, and has the help of a local sheriff. "Morning, Mrs. Burlington," Donaldson said. "Got a man here from Boston wants to talk with you about Donna." She looked at me. "You seen Donna?" she said. "May we come in?" I said. She stood aside. "I guess so," she said. Her voice wasn't very old, but it was without variation, a tired monotone, as if there was nothing worth saying. Donaldson took off his hat and went in. I followed. The room smelled of kerosene and dog and things I didn't recognize. The clutter was dense. Donaldson and I found room on an old daybed and sat. Mrs. Donaldson shuffled off down a corridor and returned in a moment with her husband. He was pallid and bald, a tall old man in a sleeveless undershirt and black worsted trousers with the fly open. That's a nice little touch there, huh? His face had gray stubble on it, and some egg was dried in the corner of his mouth. Another nice touch. Yeah, we immediately get the message. You know, this is the kind of life the kind of family she grew up in, the kind of life that surrounded her. Not difficult to imagine why she wanted to escape, and so she does, and takes off for New York City when she's only 18 years old, and ends up getting into prostitution. So, so he follows this lead up to New York, has an address, goes to the neighborhood where she was, talks to some people, and comes back to Boston. Yeah, after that, it's pretty much Spenser figures it all out, and it comes down to him putting pressure on, the bad guys. He's got to put pressure on Dorr, and there's a shootout with him. Then after that, he's got to go back, put pressure on Maynard, and there's a fight with his bodyguard, the Taekwondo expert, that Taekwondo expert that I mentioned before. And in the end, it all works out. But Spenser doesn't feel good about it. He says he's talking with Susan. He goes to Susan. "I killed 2 guys and almost killed another one. Killing those 2 was what made it possible for Linda Rab to do what she did." "I know." "You've killed people before." "Yeah." "They would have killed you." "Yeah." Then it had to be, didn't it?" "I set them up," I said. "I got them up there to kill them." "Yes, and you walked in on them from the front. 2 of them. to one of you, like a John Wayne movie. How many men do you think would have done that? I shook my head. Do you think they would have done it? They weren't doing it. They were trying to ambush you. And if they succeeded, would they be agonizing about it now? I shook my head again. You've had to kill them, Susan said. Sometime. Now it's done. What does it matter? How? That's the part that does matter. How? It's the only part that matters. Honor? Susan said. Yeah, I said. Okay, so yeah, I really liked this this one, Mortal Stakes, and I think you'll like it too. Yeah, I'd give it 8-9 stars, 8-9 points out of 10. It's not a perfect book, as I said. Yeah, there's a bit of immaturity there in who Spenser is. He's not the Spenser that we come to know and love. Not quite yet. As I said, he's still a bit scared every now and then, and he talks about it. He and Susan aren't quite an item yet, but they're getting there. And so there's just something there. If you come in the middle of the series, you just recognize that he's not quite the writer yet, Parker, that he's going to become, and that Spenser is not quite the character that he's going to become. So it's not perfect yet. But it's good. It's very good. Okay, next, the next book, Promised Land. And that book's probably, my review of that book's probably going to be a little bit shorter, only because to me, there's only one thing about that book that I really, really want to talk about, and that is that we finally get to meet Hawk. And if you don't know who Hawk is, you're in for a surprise. When I was just getting into Spenser and buying up all these books at this used bookstore, I quickly realized that I'd pick up a book, take a look at it, leaf through it real quickly, and if it had Hawk in it, I'd buy it. And if Hawk wasn't in it, I'd put it off and read it later. So, coming soon, Promised Land, book number 4 in the Spenser series. See you guys again soon. Oh, there's a movie coming up, a Spenser movie. Mark Wahlberg's going to be in it. I'm not sure how good it is. Other Spenser stuff in the past hasn't been good. I prefer to stick to these books. Let's stick to these books, guys. Okay, see you again. Thanks a lot.